The performance mode in Final Fantasy XVI is, how should I say, not very well optimized. The demo version already showed that the game struggles most of the time to hit 60 FPS. And the main question of course is now, is there any improvement in terms of performance in the final version? And yeah, the very quick answer is no. I bought Final Fantasy XVI on disc to test the game actually with and without the Day 1 patch. The performance in the final version without Day 1 patch is very much the same as in the demo version. I couldn't find much of a difference, and even we installing the Day 1 patch, which is just around 300 megabytes big, there is not much of an improvement. Even I found that apparently we have now 2 or 3 FPS more. But to be very honest, 2 or 3 frames more, that doesn't help very much, because the frame rate in the performance mode drops very often below 48 FPS. And 48 FPS is the magical number on the PlayStation 5 when we're talking about VRR, Variable Refresh Rate. And if the game runs above 48 FPS, you have actually not a bad experience. On a capable VRR screen like the G2 here as an example, you have no stuttering and you have no screen tearing. The experience with VRR above 48 FPS is actually really good. But as soon the game drops below 48 FPS, and this is unfortunately very often the case, VRR does not work anymore, and this is not an issue with your screen or TV, that's an issue from the PlayStation 5. Unfortunately, the PlayStation 5 does not support LFC low frame rate compensation out of the box. And LFC would be crucial in this case to avoid any stuttering below 48 FPS. And if you like to learn more about VRR or LFC in detail, I made already a lot of videos about this topic. And the only way, in my opinion, to play Final Fantasy XVI or to enjoy Final Fantasy XVI at the moment is the 30 FPS quality mode. And even I'm not a big fan of 30 FPS at all, because 30 FPS on an OLED screen is just terrible. On the LG CX, G2 or S95C, 30 FPS is not a great experience. But despite that, I played most of the time in the 30 FPS mode, and this was not just because of the more consistent performance or better experience in terms of performance. This has also something to do with the visual quality, because in the 30 FPS quality mode, the visual quality is much higher. And the biggest difference what I found between quality and performance mode was resolution. The quality mode runs between 1080p and 1440p, which is already not very impressive. And it gets even worse when we're now talking about the performance mode. The performance mode runs between 720p to 1080p. And yes, you heard me right, 720p is the worst case scenario in the performance mode. And I think it's needless to say that I was expecting much more in terms of the performance mode. I mean, 1080p, that's already not very much, but if it would at least hit 60 FPS all the time, this would be great. But now on top, dropping the resolution to around 720p, and again, that's just in a worst case scenario, but it happens, that's actually very bad. And not just the resolution was much lower in the performance mode, also the shadow quality took a big hit. In general, or as a summary, the performance mode is just not to recommend at this stage. In terms of visual quality, in terms of performance in general, it's just very bad optimized. And at this stage, I personally think we cannot expect a very big improvement over the time in the performance mode, even with future patches. In my opinion, but I'm not an expert, the Final Fantasy XVI engine is not very well optimized, or maybe just optimized for 30 FPS. But the fact that we can play games like Ratchet & Clank, God of War, Horizon Forbidden West, and many more on the PlayStation 5 in maybe a better visual quality, and for sure with much higher frame rate, it doesn't seem like an issue with the PlayStation 5. But that doesn't mean that I think that Final Fantasy XVI is a bad looking game in general. Quite the opposite, because I found also levels or scenarios like this here where I was really impressed with the visual quality. So 2 more things before I end this video. The first one is motion blur. I personally don't like it at all, and even in 30 FPS games like that, I would like to turn it off, but unfortunately right now there's no option for it. But I read already that there will be an upcoming patch where we get a toggle switch for motion blur. And the last thing is, and I know that's actually a topic which is discussed very often right now, 30 FPS. So I don't understand why we can't have a nice 60 FPS performance mode in a game like this. I'm not talking about Starfield, where we have maybe so much CPU power going on in the background that the game can't hit 60 FPS on the Xbox Series. That's possible, but in a game like this, I don't understand it. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but games like that need a 60 FPS mode in my opinion, because it's an action game at the end. It's not a slow pace game. You run around, you fight around, and it should have a 60 FPS mode, or a stable 60 FPS mode, because we have a 60 FPS mode, but not even close to a stable 60 FPS mode. This should be the minimum standard in 2023 on the next gen consoles.